What are the top decks in Master Duel here for, ladies and gentlemen, you guessed it, April 2022. I'm betting 30% of you guys are not smashed the living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so we can get to 104,000. Welcome to the Master Duel tier list update for April 2022, ladies and gentlemen. Now, up here on your screen, you see a little video, right? Well, we did a tier list last month back in March, and on that tier list, we pretty much laid out all of the decks. What we're going to be doing this video is we're going to be adding on to that already existing tier list that you saw in the last video, because honestly, nothing has changed in regard to that. But some things have happened. We got some new cards, and there's been a very big deck that has got the chance to kind of take the game by storm. So if you want to see the previous tier list in creation of that, I will leave a link to that video down below so that you guys can get the chance to see that. And then, as I said, for this video here, we're going to be adding on to that existing tier list. So April 2022, ladies and gentlemen, we got Synchro Turbo even more added into this. Now, we actually got everything from Dawn of Majesty imported into the game now, which means that we get the Majestic Shooting Star Dragon. Now, Stardust Synchron does add a lot to this deck. I actually got the chance to play against this deck the other day on Master Duel, and no offense to you Synchro players, but when I watch a 30-minute turn unfold in front of me as you're going, wee, Synchro! It's definitely an experience, ladies and gentlemen. I found that to be kind of hilarious, actually, just kind of watching the turns unfold for that deck. So all things considered here, ladies and gentlemen, I really do think that the Majestic Star Dragon deck, I want to put it in 1.5. Now, the reason why I want to put this deck so high on the list here is because, truthfully, in a 1-out-of-1 format, if players don't know what to do, by the way, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't know how to read. I've seen my buddies played this deck a couple of times now, and they don't know that Junk Speeder is the cutoff point. If you ash the Junk Speeder, you effect failure the Junk Speeder, you cut them off. All right, like, they're done. All right, the choke point is the Junk Speeder. All right, but I think in terms of what this deck does, unpreparedness in the metagame, honestly, this deck is one of the scariest things. You know, I don't expect a lot of players to be prepared for this just yet. And I think that's the thing that I want to give this the most credit for, is unpredictability is very, very, very much a strong point that this deck will have. All right, unpreparedness is always one of the greatest weaknesses of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. And like I said, because it's 1-out-of-1 format, you can't really counter pick all that much. And I mean, obviously, like, if you're super teched out for Drytron, this matchup's really easy because you just got to see the droplet at that point in time, and you're like, that's all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. You just break apart the deck's boards. But 1-out-of-1 format, based on how things are with the deck, yeah, I think for the most part that this is fine. Now, Despia. So Dramaturgia finally enters into the fray. Quadartist gets a chance to come on into the game here. You know, we've had Fallen of Albaz and some of the other cool things here, but is this deck really up to standards? We're down, what, Battles of Chaos right now. Dramaturgia gets entered into the game. You know, you get some, like, Quadartist extension plays, but is it really enough to deem this deck to be a crazy offshoot potential? And I think for the most part, I would probably put this, as much as I want to give this deck a little bit more benefit of the doubt here, yeah, Quadartist adds a little bit into the fray here, but it doesn't do enough at this point in time. And I think that's like my most disappointing thing about this is, even like up through Dawn of Majesty, you just don't see this deck doing a lot. But we are starting to unfold, and you're going to start to see the power of this deck do its thing. So I know a lot of players are going to experiment around with Despia. They're going to try out like some of the more splashable things with this deck. So I want to put this at tier 2. I want to give this deck a chance to shine, but truthfully, it's probably going to be on the lower end of tier 2. You're probably going to see this probably roll in about 2.5. All right, so I really want to be a little bit more optimistic about this, but unfortunately, I can't do it. Magik gets their first round of support here, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Magik is a very cute deck, but I don't think that this deck has enough just yet. Once you get the next line of support, you know, the good fun stuff, you're going to start to see this deck do some very interesting stuff. Honestly, as of right now, I think we're going to put it in everything else because it's not impactful enough on its own to really get the chance to shine. But that's what happens when you give Wave 1 support, ladies and gentlemen. It's just wetting the whistle. It's just enough to kind of get players intrigued with the strategy. And I think that's a good thing here. Now, Sous Ships. Oh my god. So this is one of the most exciting decks that I think we've seen in a long time because it's literally just sushis. But once again, in the very early stages of this deck is just a very minor exceed toolbox. It doesn't add anything particularly too crazy. You know, the metagame has Zeus at 1. See, basically, you're just, using rescue rabbit shenanigans to try to pop out exceed monsters, you know, to get out the Sous ships so you can do your thing. It's very early support. This deck can get a lot better depending on how things go. But remember, as the rest of the metagame continues to shape up, I don't think that these two decks really have anything too particularly crazy on them. Now, Speedroids. Speedroids got a little bit of support. They're missing, you know, some freaking fantastic stuff. We've seen Speedroids competing in the TCG, but until we get the upgrades to that support, it's going to be a little while, ladies and gentlemen. You guys know what I'm talking about. More searchability. Remember, they just got the Duels Pack stuff. You're going to be missing that Animation Chronicle 2021 support here, where you're going to get the little scratch-off ticket and some of the other interactions. We have seen in the TCG that this deck has had tops. Actually, before this format, Speedroids were performing relatively well in the Tier 2 slot itself. I do think wholeheartedly that Speedroids are a deck that it has a very high learning ceiling. I think that's like one turnoff from it, is if you don't know what you're doing with the deck or things like that, it's going to be a pretty big disappointment at the end of the day. But with that being said, I do think that this deck has a high turnover rate, and it will give you the chance to, honestly, if you get this down with the new support, I think you're going to have a very fun time. And I know I might be talking the Speedroids up a little bit here, but honestly, this deck is a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. Like, do not underestimate what this can do. Now, since last update, there has been this banquet of millions deck running around that's really catching a lot of players off guard. I've seen infinite videos on this. A lot of players are very sick of this because your opponent gets the option to rip apart your extra deck for a turn, which becomes really discouraging to players. But when you have a burn / strategy that gets the opportunity to rip away an extra deck, you know, like, I've heard the counter strategy to this is just to play like a 13 card extra deck, for example, which is something that some decks can do, but it depends on how far you up or how far up in the ladder you are, which begs the question, you know, in Platinum, this deck is probably Tier 1, but if you're in the lower tiers where stranger things could happen, this deck might not have the same valuable presence down there. I am going to put the Banquet of Millions OTK at Tier 1 for this video, because I do wholeheartedly think that this deck is a menace. Because it is 1-out-of-1 format is the reason why this deck gets to function, and it is once again a very dice roll dependent deck, ladies and gentlemen. We have to stress that out here and understand that dice roll decks can do things, and they can end up being very, very powerful decks. That's the same reason why we put, you know, Majestic Star where it is because, you know, in right situations, in uninterrupted game states, decks like this get the chance to do some particularly crazy things. So that is my tier list update for April 2022, strictly analyzing and looking at how things are going. Do you guys agree or disagree? Like I said, the previous tier list will be down below. You guys can see the extension edition from this to that, and I will see your beautiful faces back here later on the day. with some more cool Wallace content. You guys stay safe out there. All right, peace out, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.